copies here. Oh, we have physical copies. If anyone wants a physical copy and doesn't have one yet, if you could just raise your hand, and we'll make sure someone comes around and gives you a physical copy. Just someone from EDC. They're right up here in the bag for this gentleman up front. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us today. This is the first of 3 engagement sessions on Gansevoort Square. My name is Gigi Lee. I'm a vice president in EDC's government and community relations team. And I will be one of the presenters walking you through this project tonight. I will let the other presenters introduce themselves when they come up and do their portion. For background, we are going to, I guess we can flip to the agenda. The way that this session will be structured is that we'll give you an overview of the vision for this site and the process and timeline for which things are going to happen. We'll talk a little bit about additional public engagement moments and public review for this process and proposed plan. And then we have structured questions throughout the presentation so that you don't have to sit here and listen to us talk for a really long time before there's some interactive elements. And we'll have someone monitoring the online participants as well. So when we reach those portions, just raise your hand and then we'll call on you and the room should be able to hear you. So without any further ado, I'll just, I will begin. So we want to talk about this site, which is, I think, for those of you to just orient you, the site we're talking about currently houses the Gansevoort Meat Market, the Whitney, and the Highline site. And we think, the city thinks, that this is a very unique opportunity to activate a piece of city-owned land to fill multiple goals, including residential, educational, and cultural, right? So our overall vision here, with all of our partners being aligned, is that we're going to deliver on delivering mixed income housing. We are going to expand a world-class cultural institution. We're securing additional essential space for New York City Parks and the High Line so that they'll be able to deliver year-round programming, and also for them to have an expanded operation space. We are supporting the transition of the Gansevoort Market co-op vendors, and also we are looking at delivering public realm improvements to the neighborhood that will cement the meatpacking district into a 24/7 live, work, play community. A little recent history about this site, and this site has been ever changing in that back in 2009 it was when the High Line opens their park, their first piece to the public. And then shortly after, the Whitney Museum of Art and the city signed a contract of sale for 99 Gansevoort Street. Shortly after, in 2015, the Whitney Museum opens up its doors to the public, and ID will tell you a little bit later on about sort of the path that the Whitney went through to land in this part of the city and in this neighborhood. And then just about a year or so ago, New York City, the Whitney, New York City Parks, and Friends of the High Line and the Meat Market began engaging discussions on the future of the site. And a couple months ago is when we released this vision publicly, and today is our second public meeting where we're talking about this plan and soliciting feedback from the community on it. And so the next slide just gives you an orientation, an aerial view of the site, just so that when we start referring to it, you have an accurate sense of kind of where we are and what we're looking at. And this shows how the site is currently. So now we're going to go into each of the individual elements that are part of the vision, and I'm going to start with housing. I think it is It is pretty well known that we are in a housing crisis in New York City, particularly for affordable housing, and that the city is very motivated to use particularly city-owned sites to advance their housing policy goals. And this project will be using something called a cross-subsidy model, which I will go into a little bit more specifically on the next slide. But our goal for this project is to have 50% affordable housing out of a total of 600 units of housing. And we will start as a baseline with a program called 485X. And what that means is that mandated, there will at least be 25% of the units, of the affordable units, that will be at a 60% AMI. And later on in the housing section, I'm going to go through exactly what that means, what that means in terms of income band, how much that is in terms of a family of 2 versus 4, and then what the rents will be. So we'll delve a little bit deeper into that and get your feedback on some questions we have prepared to ask you. But I want to be clear that the proposal or the RFP that we intend to release, 485 alone is not sufficient, right? We are aiming for, and it will be very explicitly stated in the RFP, maximum. We want developers to propose their best project that maximizes both affordable number of units and maximizes the level of affordability of those units, right? And again, we are looking for community feedback today from you all on how you think those should be, as we call, blended, which is what is sort of the range of affordability that you want in this building. And then just want to point out that the housing, the city is trying to address housing citywide, and the Community Board 2 portion of Manhattan does lag behind other neighborhoods in delivering both housing, market rate housing, and affordable housing in totality. So the city is looking for building housing everywhere citywide. So the next slide talks about a cross-subsidy model. So this funding approach is one that uses the value of the land and the market rate rents to pay for the construction of below market housing units. So what does that mean? Basically, they're again, citywide, as we look at building housing, there aren't a lot of locations, meaning, actually where it's physically located, where there is a very strong market for the rents that you will be able to get. I think, we can think about, just generally speaking, Manhattan below 96th Street, maybe some in downtown Brooklyn, space that can really command the level of rent that can then be used to build the affordable housing units in that same building. And really what the city is contributing here is the value of the land, right, for development. And that will also offset the continuous, right, lower rents that the affordable unit residents are paying. So it's not only that sort of one-time construction, but think about continuously, year after year, those affordable rents have to be subsidized. And so, this is a model that the next slide will show sort of why are we using this model at this particular site, right? And so HPD, who is they are the agency that I'm going to stop after the slide. I see your hand raised. HPD is typically the city agency that builds and puts through affordable housing projects in the city. They now have a pipeline of up to 10 years to get projects built after approval, after this public process approval, right? So one, we can do it faster using this model. Two is that again, citywide, there is a limited number of units. The subsidies are by unit, that are allocated. And so there needs to be decisions made around how those subsidies and how those unit numbers are really divided amongst projects, right? So I want to say a way to describe it is that it's sort of a zero-sum game, because if you put it in if you allocate the subsidies in one place, right, it takes it away. I don't want to say it takes it away, but you can't just keep adding, limitless housing subsidies. And so for sites and locations where we can leverage market rate rent and value of the land, like we can here, we feel like the cross subsidy model is the most appropriate. And so that's bullet 3, which is really the strength of the neighborhood's housing market and the ability to subsidize. So I'm just gonna, we don't have, it's a small intimate group. So before we transition to the Whitney portion of the project, I'm happy to take, I see you have a question up front. Oh, they're not gonna be able to hear you online. So I'm gonna have to, Ben's gonna come give you the mic.
My name's Ephraim Siegel. I live in the neighborhood in the West Village. So what you're proposing is that the developer is going to be offered this site for $0, and is that a 99-year lease, or is it, do they actually own the land? What are you offering to developers? And because this is market rate housing, but this is an incredibly attractive site for people to be in a high rise overlooking the river, this is going to command really super high rents. Is that right? And that's part of what you're figuring on. So you're going to have quite, even though you're going to have subsidized housing, you're going to have quite a variation between what market rate people are paying and what the subsidized housing renters are paying.
Yes. So you asked a couple questions, and I'm going to try to get through them one by one. So the intent here is that the city will remain will own the land, and it will be, we typically, I think the city does do 99-year leases. I'm looking at my real estate team here. They're nodding. So yes. Secondly, yes, part of what we want input from the community on is, what do you think those, for the subsidized units, what the income bands should be, right? We know that prescribing to 485X, we will have 25% that averages at 60% AMI, which will throw those numbers up, what that means. But there's an additional 25%, right, that we're hoping to get your input on. Should it be low, moderate, middle? And that's part of the discussion later on. So you're right. In the same building will be residents that will be paying very little rent because they may qualify through the housing lottery under, if we decide to have, rent at like, if they make $50,000 a year and they get chosen under that income when they apply, and they'll pay what the corresponding rent is, probably, and it depends on the family size, right? It goes up depending on unit size. And then they could be living right next door to a market rate renter.
The AMI is citywide AMI or neighborhood AMI?
So it is the AMI that HPD uses, and it does include not only the city, not only the 5 boroughs, but also a little bit of the Westchester, and I'm not sure how far up it goes, but it's a little bit. It includes neighborhoods just north of the city as well. But that is the AMI. The AMI chart that we're going to be showing you is the one that HPD uses for all of their housing projects. Great, thank you. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to ID from the Whitney. Sir, yes, you had a question?
Can you?
I'm just going to give you the mic.
Just no one can hear on Zoom without.
Vincent and Cornelius from Gansevoort Street. Can you tell us what the value is of that land, a dollar value? Well, of this project, if the city's giving the land, I just wondering what that dollar value is.
Hi, this is Maria Lambert from the real estate team. I think the way that we can think about the value of the land is what goes on the land, right? So whether it's commercial or housing, that's the way that it's underwritten. So at this point, we, in order to understand the actual value of the land that we would be then providing to the developer at $0, we need to receive proposals from for the RFP that we're putting out, because each assumption that the developer makes will inform the value of that land. So at this point, we cannot answer that question truthfully, because we would have to just take into account what the assumptions that the developer is making. But obviously, it would be informed by construction costs, by financing costs, by assumptions they're making on rents and that sort. So yeah, I don't know if we can provide an answer in this moment.
Hi, Kevin from EDC. Maybe another way to think of it is, if for a given piece of land that's privately owned, if you wanted to sell it, you would go to the market and you would see the maximum price that any one person was willing to give you. And you would basically choose the maximum price, because most private market actors are profit driven. What the city is doing here is, instead of saying, give us your maximum price, we are saying, there is no price, maximize your affordability. So we'll evaluate projects or proposals not by their maximum price, but by maximum affordability.
Great. There's also a hand up online.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my husband and I are listening in. We're residents on Greenwich and Horatio. And I got to tell you, we're deeply concerned by what you have not addressed, which is the exact size and scale of what this building will be. It seems to be completely out of touch with the historic district and the restrictions on how, how high things can go. And that impact on the neighborhood. It'll certainly change the historic nature of the neighborhood and cast a big shadow. I'm actually also surprised that the High Line is in support of this, because in Hudson Yards, High Line has been very vocal about not wanting a large building casting a shadow over the High Line. And interestingly enough, I heard the other day at the community board meeting that the High Line was supporting this project, but it's going to cast a shadow on the High Line there as well. Can you address anything about the size and scale, and perhaps the consideration of, if there's going to be housing, making it, in tune with this historical neighborhood?
Yeah, so thank you for your question. So we are looking at, with the number of units, we think that the building will be around 60 stories. I think that has been covered very publicly. What I will say is that there, and other folks will address this a little bit more thoroughly, is that we think the special sauce in this project is the combination of housing, the Whitney, the High Line, all existing together and meeting multiple goals. There, we will discuss how we landed on the site plan in a little bit, but the other point that I would, urge people to, keep in mind is that we are at a very, very beginning of an engagement process. We will not be entering into a public review of this proposal until 2026, with a vote in City Council in 2027. And so we are here to get feedback, to hear your concerns, to work with the community, the overlapping elected officials. It certainly has to go through a lot of review and a lot of land use actions till we land on a final plan. But we're trying to meet a lot of goals here with one project. And we'll return to some of those concerns in a little bit, but understand your concern around density and context. As before we even certify and begin ULURP, there will have to be a very extensive environmental review that will look at shadows. And I promise you that, and Joe can address this when he comes to speak on behalf of the High Line, that, you know, sort of shadows impact plants, and they are very concerned about those as well. But he can address the thinking around that. So I'm now going to turn the mic over to ID to talk through the vision for Whitney's expansion as part of this project. And then after that will be the High Line.
Thank you, Gigi. Hi, everyone. My name is ID Arwede. I am Deputy Director of the Whitney, and I'm joined by my colleague, our Director of Community Affairs, Jen Carey, in the back over there, for those of you who haven't already met her. Thank you very much for inviting us, EDC. The Whitney could not be more thrilled to be a part of the future of this site. Professionally, obviously, I'm thrilled for the future of the Whitney. Personally, I'm thrilled. I live in the community as well. I'm on Jane Street, a few blocks away, so everything that's being discussed here resonates with me personally as well as professionally. So the Whitney turns 100 in just a few years. By 2030, we're turning 100 years old. And in those 100 years, the Whitney has been in 4 different locations across the city, starting actually in 1930, right here in the neighborhood on 8th Street. And each time the Whitney has moved in our history, we've moved because of a need to grow, a need to meet growing and evolving audience demand. And very often we've moved after years of trying to expand where we were. So when the Whitney moved downtown, we're actually going to be marking our 10th anniversary on Gansevoort Street coming up in May. And at the time we started planning for the move downtown, you know, there was very quick recognition we did not want to be in that position again. We knew that if we did things right and if we served audiences in the ways that they wanted and needed and served artists in the ways that they wanted and needed, that we would someday have a need to expand again. And so here we are 10 years later, excited to be a part of the future of this site, which is truly the only contiguous and viable site for the Whitney's expansion. And in many ways, we spent many years thinking about, you know, what this future means. And it's about, you know, a museum for a new era in many ways. When we moved downtown, originally it was very much about expanding gallery spaces, providing more space for our collection, providing spaces to support artists, contemporary artists and living artists in the ways they work today. But what has also evolved in the last 10 years has been the ways in which audiences want to engage with us, and the kinds of programs we run that go beyond the gallery, that spill beyond our walls, as you'll see in just a minute. We might actually just advance. I might say, can we just go 2 or 3 slides? I'll go in reverse order. One more. Perfect. So just a year ago, the museum got a new director, my colleague Scott Rothkopf, who was at a community board meeting recently. And one of the hallmarks of Scott becoming director has been this real push around expanding access to the museum. So when we moved downtown, we expected and thought we might see about 800,000 visitors a year in this new building. This year, we're on track to attract over 1 million visitors and growing. So we're already bursting at the seams. But in addition to that, some exciting changes have happened in the last year that coincide with this talk of the future of the Whitney. And that has been about expanding access to broader audiences. As you'll see on the screen there, we've introduced 3 new free admission programs just in the last 12 months. We started with free Friday nights and free second Sundays back in January. And just a week ago, I want to say, 2 weeks ago, we introduced free 25 and under, which means the Whitney is now free to everyone aged 25 and under all day, every day, all the time. And we've seen such a wonderful audience response to it. If you come to the Whitney on Friday nights or on Sundays, we've seen our audiences get significantly younger. We've seen more diversity. On Friday nights, for example, 60% of our audiences are people of color. That's unheard of at a contemporary art museum. These are not the same audiences who've come in the past. These are new audiences who we're attracting. We're bursting at the seams. Sundays for families, and now young people. So there's very much a focus on expanding audiences, and we're seeing the strains in the building that we're in right now. It's an exciting future thinking about who the museum is for, who we're serving. We've been welcomed by this community with open arms, and we're seeing both the rewards and the strains of that on our spaces. We can go back now. Thank you. We can go back one more. So yeah, it's about a museum for a new era. I think that slide says. I talked about the growth in our audiences. This is an installation view from, I'm not sure what show, that's our art elevator. But it's thinking about beyond our galleries, the ways in which we serve our audiences. we know for a fact that there's no place else for us to grow in the long term. And so it's really exciting to be at a point where we're thinking about the possibilities of, staying in this neighborhood for the long term, serving audiences more fully, serving our communities more fully. We can go to the next slide. And that's an installation view from the last biennial, which is also in many ways thinking about, that's not sort of the way you think of a traditional gallery or traditional space. It's thinking about the ways in which artists are working in our communities, and the flexibility of our spaces to serve them in a meaningful way. So this shows sort of spaces used in an unconventional way. What you don't see in this image is actually the ways in which we've spilled into the neighborhood. Many of our programs now occur in our public spaces, in our Largo and in the streets. As we think about the future of a Whitney expansion, there is a reckoning with what community spaces mean and public spaces mean. Some of you who are in the neighborhood may know this, but the Whitney's ground floor, our entire ground floor, indoor and outdoor, is a public space, which means we're always free and open to the public. And so how do we extend that in a more meaningful way for the kinds of programs that we run? So that's a lot of our vision, and we're thrilled to be a part of it. It's been, I know, a jigsaw puzzle to some of the points that you made, Gigi, in figuring out how the city's multiple objectives and goals can fit on this site. But we're thrilled about the possibilities for the combo of all the uses across the Whitney, the High Line, and of course, housing. Thank you. I'll stop there for now. Yes, sir.
Is the Whitney paying anything for this large tract of city land? And the design seems to show that you're going to build very horizontally. And what I'm hearing from people in the neighborhood is the amount of public parkland is really tiny as a percentage of this whole site. If you built more vertically, there'd be more park available. And that's really the community benefit that people in this neighborhood are looking for.
So I will address that, that yes, the Whitney is paying fair market value for the land that they want to expand on. Secondly, I know you referred to it as a park. We were referring to it as open space because it will not be managed by parks. It will be owned and managed by Whitney. And then I will let you address the third question.
Yes, so thank you for addressing that. And yes, you are right. We've spent a lot of time studying what our needs. There's obviously 90 plus years of history of running several buildings, but also we've spent a lot of time studying what our needs would be and what we're solving for in this particular site. Museums in general, and the Whitney in particular, function well with horizontal spaces as opposed to stacked vertical spaces. It's one of the reasons, actually, it's a key reason we left the Upper East Side, because we're going to expand into the sort of the space next to us with the brownstones that were there, but we'd have had to have stacked vertical galleries, which do not work well for visitor flow or for a visitor experience. So there's a certain horizontality that is a part of the museum experience and visitor flow that's necessary. We also know quite well and understand the constraints we faced in the building that we're in right now, the things that don't work, some of which you as a visitor may be aware of and see, and some which you may not. So it's a mix of solving for those things, and we spent quite a bit of time studying it. And I think we feel, at least on the Whitney side, pretty confident that we're going to have to, in the long term, go out and find ways to fundraise to support a project like this, an expansion like this. And we feel confident that this project, as this site plan is envisioned, addresses the needs that we have and hopefully can accommodate an inspiring and aspirational enough program to attract the kinds of supports that will be necessary to make it happen. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Tarver. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Friends of the High Line. Like the Whitney, we're excited about the opportunity expansion of our maintenance and operations building will provide so that we can meet the growing demands of the park and increase our impact on New York City. This year is the 25th anniversary of the founding of Friends of the High Line. We're a nonprofit. We have a license agreement with Parks Department to maintain and operate the High Line. And each year we must raise from private sources almost 100% of the park's operating budget. This year also happens to be the 15th anniversary of the first section of the park being open. When that section was open, there was an estimate that we would have about 350,000 visitors a year. This year, we anticipate having between 6.5 and 7 million visitors. Of course, since that first section opened, we're now 3 times as long. We're about 1.5 miles long. So, of course, 15 years later, we have a number of limitations with our maintenance and operations building. Not all of our staff can be in the building on the same day because it's not big enough. We don't have enough space in the building for the public art fabrication. The public art that you see on the park, it's almost all fabricated in the maintenance and operations building. And we've run out of space for the equipment that we use to operate a park, which is now 3 times bigger than it was when the first section opened. And we also don't have enough space for the surplus stock we need of key parts and materials to do routine repairs on the park. So those are some of the real constraints that we face. There's also a demand for programming year-round, and right now at best, we can only do programming about 7 months out of the year out on the park, obviously. So we would like to have indoor space to run educational programming during all 4 seasons. Thousands of New Yorkers attend our programming in the warm months, seniors, families, children, and youth. So with space for year-round programming, we would be able to satisfy many of those needs and go deeper with the local community and with New Yorkers across all 5 boroughs. In terms of what we're actually talking about with expansion of our maintenance and operations building, we're talking about going 2 floors up and then expanding north about 30 feet into what's now the Meatpackers courtyard. So for us, expansion will help us better support the needs of the park, which I kind of outlined what some of those limitations are that we have right now with the current building. And it's also our opportunity to dream bigger for the future and better serve New Yorkers.
Oh, we had a question online.
Yes.
Oh, hello. Were you inviting me to ask the question I typed in?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. No, I was just curious, going back to the Whitney, why is the Whitney paying for the land and not the building developer?
So the answer is both. Whitney will be paying for the land, and they have to privately fundraise for the construction of their building.
I'm asking about, but why not the developer of the high rise of the luxury building? They're not, you mentioned that they're not paying.
Hi, Marie again. They're not paying because the land value is what is contributing to the cross subsidy. So that's how we can provide more affordability in the building. If they were paying for the land, then we would not be able to subsidize it as much. So think of the land value as the way of the city to subsidize affordable housing in that building, in addition to the market rate rents being able to further subsidize additional units.
Okay, I got to tell you, you know, giving a private developer public land for developing, you know, luxury housing just does not, for some reason, feel right. I'm just going to go on the record and say that.
So just want to clarify one point. We're going to get to the site plan, but there are 3 integral, very important uses and benefits that are being provided at this project. So there is the affordable housing that's cross-subsidized by the market rate. So as Gigi had outlined, the goal here is to maximize the number of affordable units and affordability. So that is one component, and that's the request for proposal that the city will be releasing for a developer for that component. The Whitney will be purchasing their site at market value and will develop their site. So that's a completely separate project. And then the Friends of the High Line will fund and develop their expansion. So it's 3 separate projects with 3 separate owners that will be developing this project.
Why isn't Whitney paying in that? And they haven't answered the question.
I wanted to address the question that the person asked earlier about the Western Rail Yards. Our responsibility is to be stewards of the High Line, Friends of the High Line. And so we are very attentive to how surrounding development affects the park and the public's experience on the park. We were very grateful for the city and the Whitney that we could be involved in this project from the beginning to help be part of those discussions, be part of the site planning process, and because we are always very concerned about how the park and how the gardens are affected. The situation up north with the Western Rail Yards is that there was a 2009 plan that went through extensive review by the local community. The High Line was involved in that. And that was a wonderful plan that was never developed. And then recently, that plan was discarded and a new plan was proposed that had no community input. We had no input into that new plan. It is disastrous. It will have a disastrous impact on the park. I know the community is very concerned about that plan, but quite the opposite has happened with this, is that we've been involved with this process at the very beginning. We have done solar assessments of the housing development because of its slender nature and the fact that it's set back from the park. We have determined that adequate sunlight will be received in that part of the park during all 4 seasons. But I want to say that it's very important that we get the community's input on what they think, what you think about this project and about the housing project, because we think it's important that you make your views known. Thank you.
I appreciate, thank you. I appreciate the gentleman from the High Line, what you said. I just, you want our opinion. Our opinion is that it's going to impact your High Line. We have no issue with the High Line. We have no issue with, at least I don't have an issue with the museum. I think it's a beautiful addition to the neighborhood. My concern is the scale of that housing. And in order for you to make it economically viable and to offer affordable housing, you're going to have to make it ridiculously tall building out of scale with the neighborhood. And it's and it just begs the question, is this the right place to do it? Believe me, I am all for affordable housing, but given the square footage and the cost of this area, I just don't know that this makes sense. Just want to share with you, since you're asking for our input.
Thank you. And your input is noted.
Thanks.
We're going to continue on to John.
Good evening. My name is John Jabagi. You see one of my trucks over there. I'm Jabagi Meat. I'm the owner of Jabagi Meats, one of the 7 meat companies there. I'm right on Washington Street. I'm also the head of the Gansevoort Market Meat Co-op. I'm a 3rd-generation meat packer. My grandfather came to this country in 1900, started working on 14th Street for Swift & Company. My father was born in 1912, started working in the meat packing for his father in 1930. So my family's been down there for 125 years. I have seen it all, and I will tell you, it was just I started working down there in 1970 when I was a kid. It was the most remarkable, amazing place. It was just so much hustle and bustle. It was so vibrant. It was a community. It was fascinating. It was great. But quite frankly, that's been long gone. The last 15 years, we have been standing there on our own, our building. Everyone else is gone, so it's just the seven of us, and everything else disappeared. Where we are today is our building was built in 1950 to replace the open-air Washington Market. The building was designed to get the vendors off the street and indoors in refrigeration and out of the outdoor elements. The building was built with 33 small individual units of varying sizes and configurations. We've made the building work, we've broken through walls, but quite frankly, the building no longer meets current standards for processing and distribution. Today, you need more machinery, more cutting, more packaging. The building, we don't have the space for it. The building doesn't have the electrical capacity. For modern distribution, where you're bringing in pallets and pallets of boxed goods, we don't have the floor space, nor do we have the ceiling height. So the building, quite frankly, in terms of modern processing and distribution, is obsolete. Also, it's a 75-year-old building. The infrastructure is decaying, and we're right in the process. We're doing lots of repairs all the time. This plan for this block is a great opportunity for us to move on and find more suitable quarters. So quite frankly, and I'll tell you, EDC's been a great landlord over the years. City Hall's been very supportive of us. When the High Line and the Whitney both came, we were in meetings with both of them. City Hall always made sure our needs were met. And quite frankly, we've been treated as first among equals. So we're behind this plan 100%. It's good for us. We think it's great for the neighborhood. And that's where we are. Okay.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
So now we're going to transition to talk about the site plan in more detail. And Jack is going to come up and introduce himself and speak to our negotiated site plan.
Hi, good evening all. I'm Jack Robbins. I am a partner and the director of urban design for FX Collaborative, design architecture firm working for EDC on this project. So two images here before you start with the plan. It looks fairly simple and straightforward, but I want to call your attention to the word negotiated. It was not simple to get here. We spent months working with the Whitney and the High Line to come out with a plan that would give each of the parties what they needed going forward. It is, you know, as all space is in New York contested, and everyone has a little bit less than they would like, but we can all make it work, and this works for everyone. In particular, for the housing, it's a very compact and efficient footprint for the housing. We have tested it in numerous different ways, and we feel confident that that this will work to provide excellent housing. On the right are the building envelopes. So these are not building designs. If you kind of imagine a bow on those are the sort of the boxes that the buildings would come in, right? They describe the outside of the building. We don't know what the building's going to look like. We don't know what the design is going to be, right? We just know in general they will fit in those boxes. So that's where we are. We're coming to all of you very early. This is your chance to comment. There'll be many more chances as this goes through ULURP, but even before there's an RFP out on the street, this is your opportunity. We're going to go through in a little bit some of the public space and the kind of design issues as well, and really looking for your input on that.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what's to come. And so there's two terms that you've heard us use that I want to just take a moment to unpack, which is RFP and ULURP. So an RFP stands for a request for proposals. And what is that? It is essentially a document that EDC is going to release that says, here are the goals, development community, developer community, that we want you to meet on this site. So here are all the things we want you to achieve. Give us your best thinking on how you can achieve all these things, and know that you're going to be graded and compared to other proposals, so that the city can get the best deal that we can, understanding, and it will be clearly stated in the RFP, that it is based on the ability to meet these requirements, chief of them being maximizing affordable housing and maximizing the level of affordability amongst those units, right? And so we'll put this document out, we'll get responses, and EDC will go through all of these responses one by one and basically select a developer that we think gives the best plan for this site, for the housing site. And then that sort of that would then complete our project team, right? Because right now there are still a lot of questions around affordability, around who's going to be doing the building, and this developer, this future unknown developer, will come before the community and continue to have conversations, because ultimately, starting in 2026, we are going to enter into something that we call ULURP, which stands for Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. And what this is that it's a process that's in the city charter, a public review process, that any project where there is a change in land use that an applicant must go through, that requires an extensive, it's like a 7-month process that requires extensive review. So the next slide goes into this housing developer RFP. I may have gotten ahead of myself a little bit. And again, I just want to stress that the selection criteria is about maximizing the total number of affordable units at the lowest, at lower AMI levels. And also even then, we have to go through this ULURP process. And the next slide shows you what exactly this ULURP process entails. It starts with us submitting a proposal into the City Planning Commission to make sure we fill out all the right forms, and then and can answer all their questions. It then goes to Community Board 2. They have 60 days to review and comment. Then goes to the Borough President, and then the City Planning Commission, and then City Council. And in each step, Community Board, Borough President, City Planning, City Council, there are opportunities continuously for folks to show up and testify on what they like, what they don't like, and ultimately the City Council has to vote on it. The entire City Council has to get a vote that passes through the entire City Council, and then finally mayoral review. So again, when I started by saying this is the very, very beginning of the process, we are years away from an approval. And I should say, and I want to clarify this, no shovel in the ground, nothing is happening before we get approval through this ULURP process, which we don't anticipate starting until 2026. And it takes about 7 months at least.
Minimum.
Minimum. It's more 7 to 9 months, but we're giving you sort of like the most aggressive possible window, just so you understand that we are at the very, very beginning of this process. So next slide just talks about just our continued engagement moving forward. We're having a second hybrid session on January 7th, and then we'll be having another virtual only session on January 8th. It will be this same deck. And folks will have an opportunity to ask questions, ask for clarification. If you take this home and you study it and you have questions afterwards, you can come again. We have an email. And we really just want to stress that we are here to answer your questions and hear your thoughts and concerns. So now we're going to delve into the public input portion, and we're going to talk about a topic that some of you have already raised, which is affordability. So what you'll see on this slide is what is AMI, right? Stands for Area Median Income. And it shows you the income on the top, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the household size, right? So are you an individual? You're living with a partner, maybe you have 2 kids, that would be a family of 4. And then going down is the AMI bands. And in the middle are numbers that represent your income, right? And so you're not going to land exactly at 40% or exactly at 80%, right? So if you make, for example, $60,000 as an individual, you are somewhere between 50 and 60% AMI. And if you make $125,000 as a family of 4, you're going to land somewhere in the 80 to 90% AMI. So I just want to ground you in sort of what we're talking about when we're talking about, at minimum, we're guaranteeing that 25% of these units will be on, at average, 60% AMI. So that's an individual making around $65,000 a year, or a family of 4 making $93,000 a year. And you'll see how HPD breaks out their income bands as extremely low, very low, low, moderate, and middle, where those bands land when we kind of refer to this terminology. So at 60%, we average, where that is considered low income for 60%. I do want to stress that when we talk about 485X, it's an average of 60%. So what does that mean? That means that you could split up that 25% amongst some even lower, so extremely low income, and average it out with a little bit higher in the moderate income, as long as it averages to 60, right? And then just for context, the median household income in New York City is about $79,000, and the average income, according to census data for the past 5 years, in the West Village is about $153,000. The next slide will go a little bit deeper into what these affordable, what the AMI bands means in terms of the monthly rent that you will be paying. So you're one of the many, many thousands of people that apply to this project for the affordable housing portion. You get picked and you are at the 60% AMI. So you are in that red box is around your income, whether you're a single or family of 4, right? That's your family composition and income. So the monthly rent is what you are paying every month to live in your apartment as part of the subsidy that continues to give back here. Again, because I mentioned earlier, there is subsidy in both the construction, right, that we're leveraging from this cross subsidy model, as well as the continued, rent differential that we're assisting New Yorkers with here to continue to live in an affordable unit. Does that? I want to make sure I'm not seeing nodding heads. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, and that's the sort of the purpose of the slide. So now comes we pose questions to you on affordability, right? I think the question and some feedback that we'd like to get from those who came today from the public and also online is, what AMI bands does the community want to see in this project? Because we're going to ask for proposals that provide a mix of AMI bands, right? And so is the priority for you, or what you think is appropriate in this neighborhood, or if you don't live in this neighborhood, maybe your perspective is more citywide because you want to live here, right? Is Is the priority for deeper affordability, meaning the lower income AMI bands, or, right, this is one of those or situations, you want potentially more than 50% affordable units in this building, where the trade-off would be then we'd need even in the subsidized units, the affordable units, higher AMIs that may go into, in the previous slide, Ben, if you could go back, into the moderate or middle income AMI bands. Because if you're getting more rent from the moderate and middle AMI bands, right, that may be able to subsidize further and more of the lower band AMI units. So you could get, there could be a scenario where you may be able to go past 50% if you're willing to put in some higher AMI bands of those under the subsidized program. So. It's a tough, you know, there's no easy answer, but this is part of the feedback that we're hoping to get from the community. Yes, sir, in the back. Let me give you the microphone. Hold on. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Is this a fixed decision, when the decision's made, it's low, middle, or can it be a mix?
We want a blend. We think a blend makes sense, right? But the question is, what is that blend, right? So for example, and this is not for any particular project, if you look at 50%, some folks can say, I want, if 20%, if 25% is being set aside for 60% AMI, which is considered low income, you know, I would like the other 25% to skew higher so that, you know, a family where you have one public school teacher and one police officer who is more moderate income or middle income could also apply to live in this building, right? And so the question is, you know, what do you think is that right composition? So in other projects, we often see a breakdown of, say, 25% at 60 to 80, and then another 10% at 80 to 100, and then maybe another 10% at 100 to 120. When we say a blend, that's what we mean by a blend, is that they are a blend of income levels.
Okay, it seems to me that there are best practices with this that you've either already done or have been done in other cities and everything. I think it's difficult for someone who lives on Gansevoort Street like myself to decide to recommend what the breakdown should be. It seems to me that you guys should come to us with what that breakdown should be, and we could have a tighter review. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my response to that is that I think with different projects in different neighborhoods in different parts of the city, we have seen differing preferences. And so it's important to us in this early engagement process that we ask these questions and kind of think through with you sort of what you think this community needs. These folks will be your neighbors. And also, you know, to be frank, like you said, like this is the city's contribution, right, to this project. And so, you know, we really want to get some thinking and input. And maybe it's just your response is more questions back to us, and that's fine too. We're at the beginning of this, but we'd really like to get a sense of where your thoughts are on what you think would make a successful project.
What I'm hearing from neighbors is not so much these numbers, which are hard for people to consider in the abstract, but the scale of the project and whether you really need 600 units, of which maybe 300 will be, quote, affordable under some formula, or whether that is too big a project for this neighborhood. The Whitney has its constituency, the Highline has its constituency, but I can tell you that there are many hundreds of thousands of people who use Hudson River Park every single day. They're there at 6 a.m. with their dogs, with their bikes, with their jogging outfits. That is very heavily used, and access to that park is very difficult. So here you potentially have, and when we go back to your diagram of space, you have a tiny little area that you're calling public space, and a huge area that's going to the Whitney, and a somewhat, considerably smaller area to the High Line. And so I think one of the questions is, do we really need a 60-story, 600-unit building, given the character of the neighborhood and the demand for one of the treasures of New York, access to Hudson River Park and the Hudson River? There are different ways of configuring this, and I think this is one of the things you're going to hear from the neighborhood as we move forward.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. My response to that would be a couple things. I think one, part of the reason that we think this across subsidy model makes sense here is because this location has a lot of amenities, such as nearby open space, near transit, culture facilities, great schools, and those are all things that will contribute to being able to maximize affordability for a developer to make a proposal, right? And so back to the 60 stories, there is, I think I want to make clear that the goal of 50%, which we are being we're unwavering about, where we've made it pretty clear that that is our goal, and that is the bar that we're asking developers to respond to this RFP for. As you reduce the height, right, there is not a direct correlation. What I mean by that is, hypothetically, if you reduce it by 10 floors and you're only talking about 500 units, the ability to maintain the affordability ratio at 50-50 or near 50-50 becomes harder, because the upper units are the units that demand the higher rents and are subsidizing the affordable units, right? So there is always sort of like a trade-off conversation that we're talking about here when we talk about height and density and affordability. And that's, and that is part of why we want to have these conversations with the community. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, hi, I'm Faik. I live in CP2 as well. I wanted to address a couple of points, because I think on the one hand, to answer the question directly on affordability, my perspective is I would like to maximize the total number of units. And I understand in order to make the project pencil out, you need to have market rate units subsidize effectively the affordable units. My perspective is, in a, say, 800 unit building, right? I think having let's say there were 200 affordable units, right? Or you have 1,000 unit building and you have say 220 affordable units. Even though that percentage is technically lower, right? 220 over 1,000, that's 22% relative to the 200 over 800. I still think the additional 20 affordable units moves the needle, right? I want more people across all of the socioeconomic spectrum to be able to afford to live in the neighborhood. And so my response is, the New York City housing crisis is affecting people of all income levels, right? It's not just people in the very low band. It's not just people in the middle band, right? I would like to see a blend that maximizes the total number of units in the building, period. That's my perspective. I did want to respond to the points earlier, though, because I think the gentleman before me mentioned points that involve, I think, like two, concepts that have come up a lot throughout the course of this meeting. One is like on the concept of scale, right? Like it might, dominate the neighborhood, maybe not be in line with what the buildings currently look like in the neighborhood. And then the other is on like character, right? May not fit in with like the supposed character within the area that it's being proposed for. My response to both of those is, what's constant in New York other than the constant of change, right? Like, I think that part of the charm of New York is that there are buildings of an eclectic mix, right? The Whitney itself, the building is very different than the surrounding West Village. But I would argue that it's a beautiful institution. I think it's an incredible addition to the neighborhood, and I'm excited for the potential for it to be able to grow even further. We've seen in the past public housing works like the Mitchell Alma program allow moderate and middle income artists to be able to afford to live in the city. I don't think that anyone would argue that that program has necessarily been a detractor. And so my point ultimately is, what is more in character with New York than being able to provide housing of different that addresses different needs, even if it doesn't fit into the so-called aesthetic of a neighborhood? I'm all for this project. In fact, I'd like to see more units being built.
Thank you. Do we have any raised hands online? All right, let's go.
Okay, we'll start with Asher online. And you just need to unmute.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah, I have a question, but I do want to respond to the gentleman who just spoke, you know, as a neighbor as well. And, yeah, the city is about change, but it's also about respecting our past. And there's very little that we hold on to in terms of our past and our history. And the Gansevoort market is an incredibly special place. And the gentleman whose meatpacking business there, who's moving out, you know, spoke about, you know, his roots there. My family also has roots there. My great-grandfather had a meat business up in Harlem. He would come down there to collect, you know, what he needed to bring up there and sell in that neighborhood. It's a very special place, and we really have, you know, the responsibility to protect it. And, you know, by bringing in a building that's going to be more than twice the height of the Standard Hotel is really going to change that neighborhood. It's really going to poison and taint the history that is so important to preserve. So I just want to lay that out. But I did have a question. I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me, you know, make my little speech. So I guess back to the affordable housing question, I'm curious to know, will this be permanent affordable housing that you're talking about, or does it revert to market rate at some point in time? So does that sort of undermine the whole effort here to begin with?
Yeah, so thank you for your question. So the city is, we've heard that permanent affordability is very, very important as a part of this project, and the city shares that priority, and we are working towards, that is something we're working towards to be able to be a project, a part of this project, but I can't stand here and say that today, right now, that we are committing to it, but it's something we're working towards.
Okay, well, neighbors, something to consider as well.
Thank you. We'll go to Jeremy online. You just need to unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Really just two simple points that I wanted to make, echoing some of what was said. I mean, first of all, I think particularly when, you know, public parties are involved, there has to be consideration given to whether the proposed project is contextual. I think that city planning has done a very good job over the years of trying to ensure that our skyline continues to look great. It's a world famous skyline, and balancing that with all of the other needs, you know, all of the other public policy needs. This feels a little bit out of scale with the rest of the meatpacking district and with the West Village. So I would just encourage, you know, the policymakers to really give that some due consideration. You know, it's always an art, not a science, but what I saw did feel a little bit out of scale and has clearly elicited a reaction from the community, which is an indication that it may be a little out of scale. The notion that it's multiple times the height of the tallest building in the neighborhood is an interesting statistic. The other thing that we should keep an eye on is whether we're leveraging the right project to create to increase the number of affordable units in the city. There's no question this is a really important objective for everybody, but we're picking a location and a type of construction where I would imagine the cost per unit, the cost per affordable unit is going to be high. And I don't know who it was who spoke before me, but they pointed out that that's going to mean that we get fewer affordable units in total. I don't know if you can transfer the value created here in some way, but a high rise in this location is definitely going to yield a result in a higher cost per affordable unit, which means by definition, we're generating fewer affordable units as a result of this project. So those 2 points are what I wanted to add. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to someone who's signed in on an iPhone. You will just have to unmute, and I hope you know who you are. Okay, well, that's sorted out. We'll move to Austin.
Hi, my name is Austin. I'm an NYU student. Thank you for the time to speak. I just wanted to make a couple points. I wanted to echo what Spike said. I took a real estate finance class, just finished it, and one of the things that we had to deal with was juggling how to make a similar project for a similar RFP profitable with 50% affordable units. And there is always that trade-off of if you decrease the scale, make it shorter. Obviously, the context is something that people are worried about, but that's a noticeable trade-off. The shorter you make the building, the less affordable units you get. It's inherent. That's part of the reason why we have an affordability crisis. That's part of the reason why this community board has been the worst at providing affordable housing, even market-rate housing, because the buildings that we do get in this neighborhood are very few and far between. And it makes building affordable housing impossible. I don't need to go through the numbers of the kind of shortage that we're going through. This is why we passed this, yes, but this is also this neighborhood playing a part in building housing that makes it easier for everyone to live here in Venezuela, in the West Village, but also around the city. The lack of new homes is something that contributes to gentrification and displacement in nearby areas. The lack of building in the community district is part of why Community District 3 in the Lower East Side saw a lot of gentrification across into Brooklyn, because those areas did not have nearly the protections that the Greenwich Village had, and they're taking on the demand of a lot of neighborhoods. So that's something that I would want to stress. I think it would be most important to maximize the affordability, which means maximizing the unit count. I would even say the units are, if you can get more units somehow, that would be great. But I also wanted to bring up the High Line as a point, because I also did study that casino proposal for Hudson Yards. And I remember the comment, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the comment was actually about the shorter, wider base casino building that's 20 stories that spans the whole block that they're more worried about. When you have a shorter building, a shorter stumpier building, the shadow may not go as far, but it sits in the same place for longer. Whereas when you have a skinnier building like Billionaires Row, I know not most of us are particularly fans of Billionaires Row, but the advantage of a skinnier building is that the shadows move faster. They do hit a larger area, but because of the slenderness of the towers, they move faster, so they aren't as damaging as, say, a building of the size but twice as wide. But I think this is a great opportunity, and obviously you want to mix a unit mix, but whatever gets the most housing units is, I think, most valuable to the neighborhood, most valuable to Manhattan, most valuable to the city. And I think there's,
Can
yeah,
you,
that's
sorry,
about it.
can you wrap up?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Jose. Oh, yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Jose Monfort. I have lived in the West Village for 50 years, first on Bleecker Street for a couple of years in my youth, and 47 years where I'm currently live on Sheridan Square. I will not voice my opinion about the extension of the Whitney Museum or the High Line buildings because we haven't seen those drawings yet. I'm just going to speak to the housing building that is being proposed. I just personally think it's way too high, too uninspiring as it's been presented.
We can't hear you.
Where did I cut off?
Your volume just faded.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to go to the next
We'll
person.
come back to you.
We'll come back.
Zach?
Zach, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, my name's Zach Weinstein. I'm with Save Gansevoort. I had two questions that I wanted to ask. First of all, I do have serious concerns about the site plan. It's my understanding that the excuse me, request for proposals is going to have to define the footprint of the residential tower, because otherwise, how will developers know what they're bidding on and how to bid appropriately? So the first question is, once the RFP goes out, is the site plan essentially locked in place? Second question, and this follows up on a question I asked at the CB2 land use hearing last week. My understanding is that the percentage of affordable units in the tower refers to the percentage of the number of units, a certain of the, X number of units, a certain percentage of that number has to be affordable. When I asked that question, you mentioned that there are some requirements, regulations regarding the minimum size of the affordable apartments. Can you tell us what those regulations entail, what the requirements are, and also where is the relevant language located? Because it's not in the 485X statutes that I'm familiar with. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So the answer to number one is yes. The site plan is the negotiated site plan, and that will be the site plan that goes out in the RFP. Second, the size of the units and the mix of the units, meaning studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, all those will be regulated through an HPD agreement. I don't know where you can find it. Does someone know where you can find it?
I think it's on the HPD website.
The HPD website is where you can find it.
Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, that may be a difficult website to negotiate. Could somebody perhaps put in the Q&A or in the chat a specific URL where we can see the regulation?
Yeah, we can follow up. I'm sorry, I don't have the URL memorized, but we're happy to follow up.
If you could
search for it on the HPD.
If you could
website.
email your question to the email that's at the end of the deck, which is just gansevoort@edc.nyc, and just we have your you can email us there. We can respond with a more specific link.
Okay, is it possible to put that in the chat or in the Q&A somehow?
Yes, we can type it in. We can type it in the chat.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and then we have one more quick question before we'll try to go back to Jose. Who is championing the open space in the proposed plan?
So the open space, as I said before, is going to be owned and managed by Whitney. And I believe that as we move forward in the process, questions on design and programming, will be led by the Whitney. And they will have their own engagement process.
Great. Okay, and we'll try Jose one more time.
Jose?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you now.
Hi. I don't know where I cut off, but I was saying that I've lived in the village for nearly 50 years. And and I've thoroughly enjoyed living here. And just wanted to comment on the housing building that is being proposed. And I think it's totally out of scale in terms of the height and density. And I just don't think I think it's as it's been presented to us, it's a very uninspiring piece of architecture, and totally I'm totally opposed to this type of building being built, not because of who's going to inhabit the building, but because I think it should all be you know, for affordable housing. I don't think there's plenty of places where luxury buildings can be built, and there's plenty of money in this city that can afford to live in those new buildings and around the city. But this is a very special neighborhood, and I think that this would detract from the character of the neighborhood. And one thing that I attended the last meeting last week, and one thing that I did not hear anybody say was that it occurred to me that looking around, and you talk about 388 Hudson, you talk about what's going on in the St. John's terminal, and now this proposal and many others, like the building that's being built on Lower Fifth Avenue between 8th and 9th Street. I just think that I can just imagine at some point in the next 10, 20 years to have the landmarked neighborhood being surrounded by a wall of skyscrapers. And it just, you know, once you cannot find available space to build, be wanting real estate industry being so powerful.
All right, Jose, you dropped off again, but I just wanted to clarify that there is no building design because we don't have a developer. The rendering you saw is an envelope, which means that whatever design is ultimately proposed would have to fit within those parameters and can't exceed them. So that is not the design of the building. I know that online you've seen perhaps renderings of buildings. Those are not from us, and those are not vetted or approved by us. They are
Or realistic.
in terms of context. So I just want to be very clear that there's no building design. I want to be conscious of time because we're pushing 8 o'clock. There are several other topics that we wanted to get feedback on, so I'm just going to go through those very quickly, and we'll touch on them in future meetings. Or again, if you have thoughts, like please email us. It's on the last page of the deck that you have in front of you. Public realm. We know that particularly along 10th Avenue right now, there's that little bend that right now is used for the meat packers and their parking. There's no sidewalk. We know that just north and just south, it's sort of a dead zone and area. So that is something we are looking to improve in terms of thinking about street experience, sidewalk experience, open space improvements. So kind of the two key corridors that we think are really prime to talk about public realm design is Little West 12th Street and 10th Avenue.
I'm just going to add to that. These are areas that are loading docks, have been loading docks. In a few years, they won't be. What do you want them to be? What can we do here? We want to tap into your thinking and your creativity here. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Right. The next area is design. We've heard a lot about that there is a certain feel that makes meatpacking the West Village architecturally important and recognizable. And so we have a couple of pictures here of just thinking about what elements in of the surrounding context do you think could be taken into consideration or transferred into a residential design, right? What makes a building iconic and recognizable and so like that is something we want to think about and get input on. And then also sustainability and resiliency measures. You know, there are certification goals, there are things like solar panels and green roofs. You know, what do you think belongs here and will make this building and design meet some of those goals? So I think to wrap up, happy to, if you've thought about some of those topics and have feedback, happy to give you a quick 30 seconds or a minute to opine on them. I know we had to rush through the last 3 buckets because there's a lot of focus on affordability. I think there's a couple of highlights we want you to take away, which is, you know, thank you for taking the time during an evening to come spend it with us and listen to us and give us feedback. We truly appreciate it. We have 2 more sessions. Please tell your friends, your neighbors. And again, you can always email us. You can go on the website, ways that we can get the information to you that is more accessible. We are very committed to this engagement process. And the second is that, again, we are at the very, very beginning of this process. You are some of the rare people who are paying attention from the very, very beginning, and we love that. And we'll continue as we meet milestones. You know, the engagement will not end. We will be here. You will be seeing a lot of us over and over and over again at each milestone to keep you updated and to keep you engaged. Yes, you have a question. Please.
We are both members of the Whitney, and I've been a long time volunteer at the High Line. I garden. I have gardened every year that the High Line has opened. I agree that both these places could use some expansion. There is nothing to do with the tools, and everybody's, you know, it's crazy on the High Line. And as Whitney people as well, we can see the constraints there. Nevertheless, the building is whatever the opposite of beloved. Everybody says, oh, holy, whatever. It's out of proportion radically. I don't think we're talking about cutting off 10, 20 stories. I think most people are saying 60, they've got to be kidding. Finding it repulsive, getting pissed, saying, well, why don't try to keep the meat market there, you know, do whatever that takes, rather than have this, as people think of it, as a monstrosity. The other thing is most of us who are concerned about carbon footprints and hope that you can get some solar and make something good out of whatever this is, are pretty disconcerted with the likelihood of a little bit of a green roof up there doing much for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
I'm also a longtime member of the Whitney. I love the Whitney, but I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity for the Whitney to be much more creative about using this space and to give up some of their fondness for horizontal, build up a little bit and create a wonderful open space that includes an outdoor garden. It could be a sculpture garden. There are a lot of ways for the museum to add to its artistic mission and its community service mission that will open up some of this plot, because when you look at this plot plan, it just looks ridiculous that the Whitney is occupying so much of that for a building that could be higher without you know, it doesn't harm anything. They still get the usable space indoors. They can make much more use of the entire plot to have garden, outdoor artistic space that's open all the time or most of the time, and really is a community benefit. So I think with that kind of flexibility and EDCs and the city's flexibility on the size of the building and number of units, I think you can have a real winner here. But I think you have to listen hard to what the community wants, because there are a lot of needs to be served here.
Thank you. Yep, we'll just go back. Yep.
For me.
You first.
Okay. To answer the question directly around like how should we, activate the public realm around? I mean, I know you quoted earlier that the Whitney is on pace to have over 1 million visitors this year. I think there's an opportunity here for mixed use development. Having some sort of ground floor retail at the bottom, I think would be a good way to help serve the many people that are walking in the area. And two, more importantly, provides an additional income stream that could hopefully help build the case for even more affordability in the building, right? You have a commercial tenant, hopefully they'll be able to pay enough to get them to include some more affordable units in the building. So I'm excited for the possibility of, reimagining the immediate area as a place that, pedestrians can flourish. So it's not just a great opportunity to, walk inside the Whitney, but outside the Whitney is just as great as well.
Thank you. And sir, you will get the last comment.
And this would be real short. I think it's appropriate because what happens in my mind is this word affordable comes up. There's no question we have a scale issue. But the word affordable comes up and there's a reaction. There's a reaction situation. And this is a very unique opportunity with the Whitney, with the history, with the village. Creativity, as you pointed out, was what I was thinking about. And this should be branded in some way with what we're trying to do in that area of some cooperative, creative process that gives us solutions that cover many of these things, but don't use the word affordable. We want to have affordable housing, but that's a sub to a creative project. And when affordable comes in first, it puts an image in people's minds that I think automatically puts a wall up.
Thank you. Great. Again, thank you for coming and listening and engaging. So this concludes our session. Feel free to reach out. We'll be here for a little bit if you have any additional questions, and we look forward to continued conversation. So thank you.